Welcome back to this course on copyright and related rights law. In the previous sessions, we have discussed three subject matters of copyright. We started with our discussions on literary work, followed by artistic works, and the latest session was focused on musical work. In this week, we are going to be looking at dramatic works, another subject matter of copyright. In the term dramatic work, focus is on the word drama. Just like in literary works, the term literary, which has a relation to the term literature, is relevant. Similarly, the term artistic is significant for its usage of the word art, and musical work for music. Similarly, dramatic work uses the word drama, which means a composition in verse or prose intended to portray life or character or to tell a story, usually involving conflicts and emotions through action and dialogue, and typically designed for theatrical performance. We can see that there are important components in this definition. Firstly, that this is a composition, meaning it isn't just any expression, it is a creative expression. Secondly, it is intended for a particular purpose. Herein, the purpose would be the portrayal of life or character. And thirdly, the presentation of such portrayal isn't merely through words, but also includes action. In other words, there must be movement. But in understanding this definition, are we able to figure out what is it that dramatic work is looking to protect? We've understood that in literary works, it is the informative value or the instructional value or the pleasure that is offered on account of the literary enjoyment. In artistic works, it is the visual appeal. And in musical works, it is the pleasant harmony or the tune that a listener enjoys. But what is it with respect to dramatic works? In this session, we will try and understand through various definitions that are offered in different acts, in different countries, look to see how these legislations understand dramatic work. In doing so, we shall also highlight some important issues that seem to be lying in context of dramatic works. Take a look at this image. Many of you might have witnessed plays in theaters such as this. But many of us have also seen plays out on the streets. Plays incorporate the presentations of stories, as we had seen in the definition, where the question is, does the expression portray life or some character? A play seems to be bringing a story to life. In the UK Copyright Act, dramatic work is interpreted as a work of dance or mime. We all understand what dance is, but if we were to identify whether there is a definition of dance out there, this is how it would be defined. A dance is to move rhythmically to music, typically following a set sequence of steps. What is a mime? Not a term that we hear a lot. Mime refers to the theatrical technique of suggesting action, character, or emotion without words, using only gesture, expression, and movement. You can see here, this is an image of a person dancing. From the looks of it, he is an experienced dancer, skilled at what he is doing. This image is of a performer who is going to be performing a mime. But importantly, when we look at Section 3 of the UK Copyright Act, it doesn't say dramatic work includes dance or mime. Rather, it says dramatic work includes a work of dance or mime. What does this indicate? We know that dance is a performance. Similarly, we also see that a mime is a performance. The use of gestures to convey meaning without the use of words, that's what a mime is. But both of these are performances. How did we understand performances with respect to musical works? We understood that an instrumentalist who plays a piano, for example, would be performing. But on the question of what is he performing, we had understood that he is performing a musical work. Similarly, what this definition seems to be telling us, that where dance is a performance, the dance is a representation of some underlying work, which according to Section 3 is a work of dance. Similarly, the mime as a performance is also based on something. This, according to Section 3, is a work of mime. So, in recollecting, what are the attributes of a work? We must remember that copyright protects expressions and not ideas. And therefore, there must be some tangible consideration that is existing upon which a performance can be based. Can we also not say that just like we understood with musical works, that through performance there could be a creation or a generation of a musical work? Perhaps through dance, a work of dance could be generated or created. But one thing is for certain, that a performance is not a dramatic work by itself. We can separate dance from the work of dance. And as we were attempting to understand, through dance there could be a generation of a dramatic work, or a work of dance as it is referred in the UK copyright. But how does dance generate a dramatic work? Consider this image. In this image, you can see a person performing. She's singing. We had understood that fixation of musical work may or may not be a requirement in the Copyright Act of a specific country. In relation to the Indian Copyright Act, we had seen that a designed modification to the law came in 1994, wherein the mandatory fixation requirement was removed. We had also discussed how this change that was brought to the Act was done in terms of preserving and protecting the cultural musical traditions of India, in which graphical notations are not that prevalent. Therefore, where fixation is not a necessary requirement, singing can be a means to create a musical work. Similarly, playing a piano could be a means to create a musical work. Now that we are on the point of fixation, let us look at Section 2H of the Indian Copyright Act, which interprets dramatic work. You can see it states dramatic work includes any piece for recitation, choreographic work, or entertainment and dumb show, the scenic arrangement or acting form of which is fixed in writing or otherwise, but does not include a cinematograph film. You can see that the interpretation of dramatic work in Section 2H is an inclusive interpretation. Unlike how artistic works has been interpreted with specific subclassifications, dramatic work interpretation starts by saying it includes such and such considerations. This is similar to how literary work has been defined under the Indian Copyright Act, as you would recall. Let us take a look at the term choreography that is used in Section 2H. It is different from how it is defined under the UK Copyright Act, in the sense, instead of saying choreography, the UK Copyright Act says a work of dance. And thus, in referring to the ordinary meaning of what choreography is, we understand that it is a sequence of steps and movements in dance or figure skating, especially in a ballet or other staged dance. A dumb show is another term for mime. But in this interpretation, you can see two important considerations. One is the mandate for fixation, wherein it says fixed in writing or otherwise. And second, that it does not include a cinematograph film. Where it says fixed in writing or otherwise, the provision itself looks to mandate fixation. Why is this the case? We do not see such a requirement under Section 3 of the UK Copyright. The distinction we must note is that the UK Copyright Act, in a separate provision, provides for the mandatory requirement of fixation. But because subject-specific application of fixation is necessary in India, because in works such as musical works, fixation has been diluted. With respect to dramatic works, we find fixation to be a mandate. But why is it a mandate? Consider this image. You can see a representation of perhaps a group of friends dancing at a party. Would the dance in such a spontaneous setting lead to some specific sequence of steps being followed by all the dancers? While this is not entirely impossible, the chances of a sequence of steps being followed by all dancers is manifold if it is predetermined. Which in this case it is. For a performance like ballet, the level of sync that the dancers have to be in as a group, there is an intense level of practice that needs to be met on a predetermined course of action. And this predetermined course of action is satisfied, and there is certainty if it is fixed. Fixation, therefore, offers clarity to anybody who wants to understand what the specific sequence of steps are. Is there any other way, apart from writing, that fixation could be achieved? Writing, let us understand it in a broad understanding, even though writing is not specifically defined under the Indian Act. Let us consider it how we understood expressions in literary works. Writing could include the use of symbols, and therefore any notation that could be used to represent a dance step could possibly satisfy writing as well. Or otherwise, could be a reference to recording. For instance, if a choreographer is used to practicing a sequence of steps in a studio, instead of writing it down in any format, then recording such a sequence of steps would satisfy the fixation requirement. Let us take a look at how dramatic work is defined under the Canadian Copyright. It says under Section 2, dramatic work includes any piece for recitation, choreographic work or mime, the scenic arrangement or acting form of which is fixed in writing or otherwise. So far, there is a great similarity between how the Indian Copyright Act defines dramatic work. But the Canadian Copyright Act includes cinematograph works as dramatic works, which is the opposite of what the Indian Act is saying. As you can see, towards the end of Section 2H, dramatic work excludes cinematograph films, but the Canadian Copyright Act includes it. What does a cinematograph work mean in the Canadian Copyright Act? It means any work expressed by any process analogous to cinematography, whether or not accompanied by a soundtrack. Thus, a cinematograph work, which is effectively a recording, a process that is followed to generate fixation. How is it that the Canadian Copyright Act considers this as a dramatic work? This is a fundamental contradiction between two copyright acts in two different countries. But what if there was a logical explanation to how there can be a possible inclusion of cinematograph film or works within dramatic work? This is something which we will explore and understand in greater detail in a coming session this week. Let us also look at another inclusion in dramatic work that the Canadian Copyright Act makes. And this is with relation to compilation of dramatic works. In our study on literary works, we understood that literary work protects compilations. Therefore, what would otherwise be a literary work in which the content is dramatic work, in the Canadian Copyright Act, it is a dramatic work. Let us look at still another copyright legislation. This is the Singapore Copyright. In this, dramatic work includes choreographic show or other dumb show, if described in writing, in the form in which the show is to be presented, and a scenario or script for a cinematograph film, but does not include a cinematograph film as distinct from the scenario or script for a cinematograph film. In explaining a dramatic work, thus, the Singapore Act provides a layer of distinction which will help us in our exploration into how cinematograph films or cinematograph works can fall within dramatic work and not. According to this act, the screenplay or the script on which the cinematograph film is based, that can be considered as a dramatic work, but not the film itself. When you look at this image, you would appreciate that being a recording, the Indian Copyright Act seems to be making a distinction between what would be a type of standalone work in itself or a different subject matter than dramatic works. But is that really the consideration, or is there something else? With relation to scripts, we understand that scripts are written. But if scripts are written, then how is a script a dramatic work and not a literary work? This possible confusion between dramatic works and literary works is a more foundational confusion which we will look to answer in the next session and the next before we come to the question on the distinction between dramatic works and cinematograph films. Thank you for joining me in this session. I will see you again in the next session. Thank you.